508 is where I'm from. Hey guys, True Crime Curiosities, and this is my introduction to Turtleboy. I hope some turtle riders are here, but let's just get into this. There is a lot going on in this case, and if you haven't heard about it, it's really just filled with all kinds of controversy. So let me just play Turtleboy. This is a clip from the first time Turtleboy got arrested. After I play this, I'll get into more of an explanation of kind of what's going on in this case and just a review for people that already know the case of an article I found that I thought was really interesting. And then we'll just give we'll give more timely updates about what's going on with him right now. So let's just play this.
Lieutenant Brian Tully, one of the people I've been exposing, the man who signed all of those fraudulent police reports that we've now exposed for being lies. He had the audacity to come to my house and put me in handcuffs today. I'm not scared of him, and I will not be silenced, and I will be steadfast in keeping on with this mission to expose the real killers of John O'Keefe.
Do they serve a search warrant in your house?
Yes.
Do you know what they grabbed from your house? Did they pull anything out?
I have no idea. So,
are you going to do anything differently as far as your job?
Everything that you heard in that courtroom today is legal, protected opinion. I would like to point out that 2 weeks ago in this very same courthouse, one of the alleged victims in this matter attempted to get an order in here using those same exact arguments and those same exact quotes.
It's true.
The judge denied it.
Oh, yeah.
The judge denied that order.
Probably going to bring that up.
Courthouse
Probably going to bring that up.
Ago.
Yeah.
So what
This is so meta. I'm actually watching Turtleboy talk about himself while he's watching himself. So this is like really postmodernism at its finest. This is his channel. And I suggest that if you're interested in this case, to go and look from the very start and follow what he's been doing. Let's get back to what he's saying here.
has changed? What facts of his case have changed? Absolutely nothing. This is a gross exercise of state power. This is what fascism looks like.
It's true.
And as journalists, we should all be concerned that this is what they do. They also told me that every single person who came to the peaceful protest rolling rally in Canton on July 22nd, one of the things that has led to these charges, every single person in there is now under investigation.
That's what they told me. That's what Tully told me.
Under investigation.
It's so scary.
And they cannot arrest us all. Maybe they can.
Going in today, you mentioned something about a Ford SUV.
Yeah, so according to Lucky Loughran, the man,
and I love that, but like, because the world doesn't know about the Ford Edge, and they should. We should make like, who was driving the Ford Edge? Like, like, did you look into that Ford Edge? And now I get to talk.
Turtleboy has like legit like balls of steel. So it's unbelievable. I really hope if anybody doesn't know about this case, that they look in to see what this one person has done to really make a lot of changes in this case and bring up a lot of questions. And honestly, any one of us can do this. Most people, I think, may not do it for various reasons. He's in jail right now. So, there you go. When you start speaking up and exercising the First Amendment and reporting on things, which is perfectly legal, and you mess with a powerful group of people, they will jail you. And that's what's happened to him. So, but he's a trip, man. He does not care. He's for truth. He's for the truth. And I believe that he is telling the truth. So let's get back into it.
Talk about it. Like, it was brilliant when I got out of the car. I'm like, we're going to talk about the Ford Edge because it's going to catch their attention, and then they're going to ask me about it, and they did.
34 Fairview Road that day at 2:30 a.m. He drove by Brian Albert's house, and there was no body on the front lawn. He said he would have seen a body had it been there. We know this because he was interviewed.
He's about to get nuts in a minute.
And one of the alleged quote-unquote victims in this case. According to Mr. Loughran, 30 minutes later at 3 a.m., he noticed that a Ford Edge was parked outside directly where John O'Keefe's body would later be
Yeah,
found.
maybe the sweater guy should
2
find it out.
months later, here we are. Nothing has been done to find
Nothing.
out who was
And
driving
that's
the Ford
Turtleboy.
Edge that was parked next to where a dead Boston police officer was found. Nothing. And this is what they're wasting their time with. Me. There is a man who murdered a Boston cop out there, and they're doing nothing about it.
Ooh.
And they're coming after the only
Uh-oh.
journalist
Daddy's
who's
mad.
actually
Get nuts.
reporting
Oh, no.
what happened.
Get
And I will
nuts.
not be intimidated. I will not be silenced.
Love it.
And we will continue on our journey for justice for John O'Keefe and for Karen Reed.
Oh boy.
Period.
Oh no, now they've done
He
it.
is
Now they've done it.
fired up. He is fired up. So that's a little introduction there to Turtleboy. And so let's just kind of get right into the case here. This is the article I found, and I'm just going to give you a little overview about what's going on here. Let me just present it. I'll tell you what, StreamYard is not user-friendly. I love that they've done what they're doing, but they don't make it easy to share some of this stuff. So please bear with me. Okay, so here we are. This is an article that came out in, looks like it's called Boston, the City Life. And I'm just going to kind of briefly read what went down. And this is interesting because I did not hear any of this before. I suspected that perhaps Karen Reed was discussing the case with Turtleboy. And we'll get into that as well. All right, so did a successful South Shore woman really kill her police officer boyfriend? Or, as she claims, did a slew of dirty cops frame her? Inside the simmering tabloid drama dividing this tight-knit Massachusetts suburb. And the suburb is Canton, Massachusetts. And boy, has it ever divided this town. Snow had just started to fall as John O'Keefe and Karen Reed stepped into the Waterfall Bar and Grill on Washington Street, Canton's main drag, on a Friday night in late January 2022 at around 11 p.m. It was the couple's second stop of the night after visiting another popular local pub. O'Keefe, a burly, brown-haired Boston Police Department officer, had been living in Canton since 2014, raising his niece and nephew after his sister died of a brain tumor and her husband succumbed to a heart attack 2 months later. The kids affectionately called their, quote, funkle by the nickname JJ. For the past 2 years, he had dated Reed, an equity analyst, an adjunct professor at Bentley University, who lived in Mansfield, but spent much of her time at O'Keefe's helping with the kids. So that's the setup. That's who John O'Keefe is, Boston Police Department officer, and Karen Reed is a woman who was dating him. He had adopted his niece and nephew after his sister and his brother-in-law died. It's actually very sad, and he sounds just like a great person. Inside the bar, O'Keefe spotted friends sitting at a high top near the band, and he and Reed walked over to join them. At the table sat O'Keefe's neighbor Chris Albert, town selectman of Canton, his brother Brian Albert, also a Boston Police Department officer, who leads the Fugitive Apprehension Team and was featured on TNT's Boston Finest, and Brian's sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe. So he knows these people. One of them's a police officer, one's a town selectman in the town he lives in, and these people are all sort of related because they're married to each other's sister-brother type thing. All had been raised in Canton, a middle-class town of some 24,000 people, located 20 minutes south of Boston, where families' lives and social calendars are often dictated by high school and weekend sports. This is like a typical New England town, let me tell you. That night, as the storm rolled into town, parents in the bar had a pretty good hunch they'd all get a hall pass from the typical Saturday grind of shuttling kids to sporting events. Band played, mood was festive. O'Keefe downed some beers. Reed drank some vodka sodas. Quote, lots of them, they say. Okay, so we're going to already set her up as a drunk. When the clock ticked to and I'm not saying she is, I'm just saying that is part of the story. When the clock ticked to midnight, it was last call. They close early in these towns. That's another thing about New England. The night wasn't over, though. Brian Albert announced he was heading home to have a beer with his son for his birthday and invited the group to join. O'Keefe wanted to keep the party going. That's the first I heard of that. Reed was tired, buzzed, hungry, wasn't really sure if she wanted to go, but she figured she'd give him a ride. On the way out, O'Keefe grabbed a half-full cocktail glass off the table, took a slug, and carried the rest of the drink out the door with him. That matters later because this glass comes up in the evidence against Karen Reed. The couple walked over to Reed's Lexus SUV, leaving foot tracks in the white dusting of snow. Reed sat behind the wheel. They put in the address of 34 Fairview Road into Waze, and then they drove off. They arrive at Albert's home. O'Keefe steps out of the car, and Reed decided she was going to go home. Several hours later, around 4:30 a.m., Reed says she woke up alone in the same clothes from the evening before on the couch at O'Keefe's house. So basically, they went out, couple goes out, he runs into some friends. They're a little buzzed. They're going to go over to this after party at 34 Fairview Road. And she decides when she gets there, I don't really want to go. I just want to go home. And so she goes to his house. She drops him off. And, that's pretty much the end of it until she wakes up on the couch in the clothes that she went out in. I think we've probably all done this type of thing before. So everything seems pretty normal as of yet. She looks out the window, though. She could see that there was a nor'easter bearing down hard. His niece was upstairs asleep, the one that he had adopted. His nephew was at a sleepover. But John wasn't home. John O'Keefe wasn't home. So she's probably wondering, okay, where the frick is my boyfriend? So she thought to call McCabe to see if O'Keefe, see what's going on. Is he there? Did you see him? But she didn't even have this woman's number. She did not have Jennifer McCabe's number. So she went upstairs. She remembered that her niece, that John's adopted niece was friends with Jennifer McCabe's daughter. And so she probably had the number. So she goes upstairs. She's panicked. She woke her up and she asked her to dial Jen McCabe. And Jen McCabe said she had no idea where O'Keefe was. So McCabe hung up and then went and called Chris Albert's wife, Julie, because they were all there, who lived just a few doors down from O'Keefe, to ask if he had passed out at their house. Meanwhile, Reed called O'Keefe's lifelong friend, Carrie Roberts, who also lives in Canton. Neither woman had seen or heard from O'Keefe. Where was he? She was really worried. So within an hour, Reed, McCabe, and Roberts met up at McCabe's home. And after returning briefly to O'Keefe's house, they piled into Roberts' car to look for O'Keefe. In the back seat, Reed screamed about her boyfriend being missing as the women drove through the pre-dawn streets of Canton. The dash read a temperature of 18 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a cold, cold day. And this is just a picture of the 34 Fairview Road, Canton, Massachusetts home where she last saw her boyfriend, where she dropped him off. And this would have been, whose house was it? Let's just recap this. Yeah, this was the Alberts home. Okay. So that's kind of interesting because it says here, McCabe hung up and called Chris Albert's wife, Julie, who lived a few doors down from O'Keefe. So these people are all in the same neighborhood. So Chris Albert lived a few doors down from John O'Keefe. And that's interesting because this house belongs to Brian Albert. So McCabe, for some reason, thought maybe John O'Keefe ended up at Chris Albert's house. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, regardless, they approached the house where Reed had last seen her boyfriend. She shouted that she spotted him and scrambled out of the car. It was pitch black outside, but on the left side of the property at 34 Fairview, she saw O'Keefe's body lying covered in the snow. That must have been terrifying. She raced toward him, dropped to her knees beside him, and frantically cleared the snow off his torso. Then she lifted both their shirts and laid on top of him. She was trying to warm him. Roberts, who had run over to O'Keefe's body, cleared the snow off his face, and then Karen Reed started giving mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and Roberts administered chest compressions. She noticed that he had blood around his nose and mouth. His right eye was blackened and swollen, and O'Keefe's baseball hat and one of his black Nike sneakers was missing. McCabe rushed over with blankets from the vehicle to warm O'Keefe and dialed 911 at 6:04 a.m. That's interesting that they're saying this, because this story has definitely changed. And in fact, it was a 911 call that was leaked by Turtleboy, in which you can hear Jen McCabe. It sounds like she's in the car, and Karen Reed is outside of the car screaming and asking for blankets. So I don't know what's factual in this part here. From the 911 call, it sounded like Jen McCabe was calling 911. You could hear this because Karen Reed had left her phone in the back seat and it was recording. I'm not sure. She must have tried calling someone and then it started recording or something. It wasn't intentional, but that's what happened. And this 911 call that's out there, and you can hear her screaming and like freaking out. And Jen McCabe is just basically saying, that there's this body at this residence. What's interesting about that is when Jen McCabe calls, she doesn't mention that this is a police officer that's died. And she gives a different address of where he's found, not the address in front of the Alberts. So make of that what you will. As they waited for the ambulance, Reed repeatedly cried out McCabe's and Robert's names. That's the part I heard. She was calling them out for help, but from what I could gather, it didn't sound like they were really a part of the resuscitation team. Again, this is what I remember hearing on this leaked 911 call, but I don't know. Perhaps they did. Soon police arrived, ambulance, take him to Good Samaritan Medical Center in Brockton, and he was pronounced dead 7:50 a.m. This is tragic. This is so tragic. So detectives began investigating, and within days, Reed was charged with manslaughter on suspicion of hitting O'Keefe with her Lexus. But this was not the end of the story. A year later, the court case would blow up on local news sites and become the focus of a conspiracy theory, which has definitely ignited protests, ruined reputations and friendships, and divided the community of Canton, shredding the social fabric of the tight-knit suburban town. Yes, it certainly has. This article was written in September, so just a few months ago. Well, maybe 6 months ago at this point. All right, so for 3 days after finding O'Keefe dying in the snow, Reed laid curled up on her parents' couch in Dighton, shocked and confused. She apparently does not remember hitting him. She doesn't know what's going on, and she's trying to make sense of the night. Most likely, this is probably a combination, I'm going to say, of, I don't know if she got blackout drunk, but sometimes when you drink, you don't have a great memory the next morning of exactly what happened. And essentially, this was all this put her into shock. And definitely shock will change your opinion. Like I said before, your mind tries to make sense of things, tries to create some sort of narrative that comports to reality. And so she lost her boyfriend. All she remembers is dropping him off. And I think she was starting, from what I can gather from this, because apparently there's been allegations from Jen McCabe and maybe Roberts saying that she was saying, I hit him. And they're saying that this was her confessing to killing him, right? Whether that's true or not is up for debate. What she says is she was saying, did I hit him? And here's the thing, you can go either way, right? You could imagine that someone was drunk, hit someone, killed them, and went home and really just doesn't have any memory of this, right? It'd be awful, but I think that's potentially something that can happen. The issue is that she says that what she was saying was, did I hit him? Did I hit him? And that makes sense to me that she would ask that question, right? Because she's trying to understand what happened here, like what the hell happened, especially if there are other people there sort of saying things that might make you think that you've done something like that. So it gets kind of sticky right away. However, you would think this is still a case that can easily be solved, right? You just need to do the right detective work. The day she returned to her Mansfield home, Reed says she was in her kitchen talking on the phone with a friend who lives in Florida when she noticed a Chevy Silverado pickup truck parked in front of her house. Soon, she says, about 6 other vehicles appeared, and then nearly a dozen police officers converged. At 7:40 p.m., officers handcuffed Reed and drove her to the Blue Hill State Police Barracks. She spent the night there, and when officers took her to a holding cell in Stoughton Courthouse, she says she and Yannetti stood on opposite sides of the jail bars and reviewed the charges. The medical examiner had noted, this part's really important to the story, several bloody abrasions etched into O'Keefe's right arm, 2 swollen black eyes, a small cut above his right eye, a cut to the left side of his nose, and an approximately 2-inch laceration to the back of his head. So he's got injuries on the front of his face and the back of his head. And I saw a picture, and he's got his eyes, the way they're swollen and the bruising. This looks like someone who just got the shit beaten out of them, okay? Like with a baseball bat, maybe. I don't know, but it looks bad, all right? He has skull fractures and bleeding of the brain. His pancreas was dark red, indicating hypothermia. So the rest of the information contained in official reports was even harder for Reed to hear. And I'll be honest, I have tried to get the reports from the courthouse because that's the way I really would prefer to look at a case. It's difficult to get court records, period. It's just difficult. And I can't get them. So if anybody has them, that'd be awesome because I'd love to read the actual court records. Anyway, according to witness interviews, Reed had told McCabe she had last seen O'Keefe at the waterfall. She and O'Keefe had gotten in a fight, and then she didn't remember dropping him off at the 34 Fairview Road. This is still a plausible story, right? That you could say, well, maybe that's possible. According to Robert's account in the charging document, Reed was so drunk that night that she told Roberts in the morning she didn't remember anything from the night before, though she had wondered if O'Keefe was dead or had gotten hit by a plow. And that's another really important piece of this puzzle because there was a plow that went by after the time that O'Keefe had dropped off John O'Keefe. There was, and that man is a witness in this case. And he was contacted by Aidan Kearney, also known as Turtleboy. So before Roberts, McCabe, and Reed found O'Keefe's body, Roberts told police Reed showed them her cracked right taillight, saying she had no idea how it happened. When an emergency responder asked Reed how O'Keefe had injured his face, the document states Reed said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Okay. Maybe she said that. It's possible. Does it mean she hit him? I don't know. It sounds like she just said she doesn't remember anything. In addition, it stated that Canton police found a broken cocktail glass and multiple patches of blood in the snow near where O'Keefe's body had been located that morning. Special emergency response found pieces of plastic, 2 red and 1 clear, in the same vicinity as the body, and these were all consistent with broken taillight. The document noted that officials seized the car and found that it had broken glass embedded in the rear bumper, a deep scratch and a dent on the right side of the rear tailgate, and 2 scratches plus some chip paint on the right side of the rear bumper. Considering the evidence, police and prosecutors concluded Reed was intoxicated. She backed up, struck her boyfriend, and then drove off. I'm going to tell you something. People, when you back up, when you back up in a snowstorm, right, and you hit something, okay, maybe you hit somebody and they fall down in the snow. Maybe they scuff their elbow when they land, or however they end up landing. Okay. But in order for her to back up her car and gain the amount of speed and momentum that caused not only this tail light to be broken in such a way with literal like paint chipped off, okay, and then compare that to John O'Keefe's injuries, okay, which is face, black and blue eyes swollen, laceration to the back of the skull, multiple skull fractures. Okay. In addition to, they haven't mentioned it yet, but his right arm has a bunch of abrasions on it. Okay. This does not sound like someone who was intoxicated, kind of backed up and bumped into somebody, her boyfriend, and then just drove off. Okay. That's something that's believable. Someone's drunk, they're irritated, the person gets out of the car, they back up, they hit the person, and then drive off. That's believable, right? What's not believable to me is somebody backing up and causing this as a result. That's where the story loses me immediately. Do you know how fast she would have to be going to cause that kind of damage to her car and to John O'Keefe? In reverse, by the way. She'd have to be like Jack Bauer. Remember Jack Bauer? She'd have to have that kind of ability to drive. Now, if that's what she did, I mean, what do you I'm guessing like 40 miles, 50 miles an hour to back up and cause that kind of damage. And then also the fact that he's got a laceration, multiple skull fractures in the back of his head and the front of his head. And then his arm has abrasions, right? So like, is she like backing up multiple times to like, and he's just got his arm up? This does not make any sense to me, right? But anyway, they decide they're going to arrest her in the holding cell. No sooner had Reed and her attorney read the evidence, then the bailiff came for her. He leads her into the courtroom. She's effing terrified, as anyone probably would be, because she still doesn't understand what's happening and is asking herself, is it possible that I hit him by mistake, right? On the other side of the aisle, Reed's mother prays, and then Reed enters not guilty. Afterward, Unetti told reporters outside the courthouse that his client was in shock and that O'Keefe's death had been an innocent accident. Reed had no criminal intent. She loved this man. She's devastated. That's interesting, too. Never heard that Unetti said that. They're reporting this as fact. I don't know. It wasn't long before a far more sinister theory of what happened began to emerge. On his drive home after the arraignment, Unetti says, he returned a call to a tipster who had previously called his office, a man with a gravelly voice who initially offered up a fake name. Picked up the phone and he told Unetti, your client is innocent. John was beaten up by Brian Albert and his nephew. They broke his nose, and when O'Keefe didn't come to, Brian and a federal agent dumped his body on the front lawn. That's insane, right? So now the story is really starting to get a little bit crazy. A federal agent, no less. I don't know who that person would be. This is allegedly from a tipster that calls Karen Reed's attorney Unetti and says these things. An attorney for the man Unetti identified as the tipster denies Unetti's version. I don't know who this person is that's saying this, but clearly somebody said something. I don't believe that a attorney would just simply make this up. Unetti didn't know what to think. Was this plausible? He thought about the people at the after party that night. Brian Albert, the homeowner, was a prominent Boston policeman. There was also a federal law enforcement officer at 34 Fairview that night. Oh, Brian Higgins, the special agent. I should have known who this was. Brian Higgins, a special agent with the Bureau of ATF, with whom both O'Keefe and Reed were friendly. Given the new information, Yannetti and Reed say they began to believe Reed was being framed. So she's like really just confused about what happened that night. She probably just doesn't even remember very much, is my guess. They hired a private investigator to knock on doors in Canton. Most people turned the gumshoe away, but Canton resident Tom Beatty offered up a new tidbit. So here we go. Another person in Canton who decides to say something. Tom Beatty. His daughter was friends with Brian Albert's nephew, Colin Albert. He said that Colin had been at 34 Fairview Road the night O'Keefe died. So that is where that evidence comes from. A resident who is friends with Brian Albert's nephew, Colin, has a daughter. She is friends with Colin, and he tells this investigator Colin was at the house that night. Very interesting. Now, Turtleboy has reported on this being the case. I don't believe he ever mentioned this person's name. Maybe he did. Maybe he did. I've been watching Turtleboy for 9 months since he took this case under his wing, I guess the best way to put it. When Reed heard this, she says the news transported her back to a night during the spring of 2020 when O'Keefe's home security alarm went off and he bolted out of bed. She followed him down the stairs and says she remembers seeing Colin Albert and several teens in the front yard. Go fuck yourself. Reed remembered Colin yelling at O'Keefe. Get the fuck out of here, she recalled her boyfriend replying. The next morning, Reed says, the couple awoke to a dozen empty Bud Light cans strewn in the bushes. The police were never called, but from then on, she says, there was bad blood between Colin and O'Keefe. In fact, she now adds, Colin was the only person with whom O'Keefe ever had any issues. Very interesting. And this makes sense to me that you would start thinking about these things after you've been charged with a murder that you don't remember committing whatsoever and have really no reason to. Even if you were angry with your boyfriend and you had a couple drinks, this is a woman who doesn't strike me as someone who loses control emotionally, right? If you see Karen Reed, number one, just based on her credentials, she's a adjunct Bentley college professor. She works for an equity firm. She's a successful person, and not that successful people can't lose emotional control, but it just fits, right? Like it doesn't strike me as someone who's going to like lose her shit and start like backing up and plowing into her boyfriend and then just leaving him there intentionally, no less, which is what the state has now decided she's done, which is just absolutely insane. But anyway, moving on. After hearing that Colin Albert had been present at 34 Fairview, Reed says another apparent clue in the case soon appeared when Reed and her father, William, met with Yannetti in his office. Reed saw police photos of O'Keefe's body, and she couldn't believe it. She didn't wait till now here you go. She recalls waiting until taking the elevator back down to the lobby to break down. This is a person who is able to control their emotions, right? It looked as though someone had beat the shit out of him, she says. As she and her father drove home, Reed called her mother and described the bizarre injuries on O'Keefe's arm. Her mother suggested, is it possible that they have a dog? Yes, as a matter of fact, they have a German Shepherd. All right, so 3 months later, Reed says a couple that Reed and O'Keefe had been close to came over to her house for dinner. They had just testified before a grand jury in the case, along with others who appeared in Reed's call log the morning that John O'Keefe, her boyfriend, the Boston cop, died. Over Italian takeout, next to a sideboard crowded with pictures of her and John, they read that the state trooper Michael Proctor, a Canton resident and lead detective on the case, had mentioned that he had known members of the Albert family for years. Whoa. Now this is a problem too, right? So the guy that's like the lead detective on this case has mentioned that he knew this Albert family for years. So this is obviously a conflict of interest for him to be investigating this murder when the body was found on the Albert's front lawn. Doesn't sound like a good idea. So Reed says, this sounds like a conflict of interest. And I would agree with that. So when her guest left, she went upstairs, she got on her laptop, and she just started looking on Facebook. And she sees that Proctor's sister, this is the lead detective investigating O'Keefe's death, is basically at a wedding that shows Colin Albert. And Reed found another photo of Proctor's parents and sister alongside members of Chris Albert's family. So now you see that these people are connected. Okay. I don't think you need any more than that. Okay. They went to one of them was in the wedding party. They were at a wedding. They're friends. Okay. This guy is probably not, he should not be investigating this murder. All right. Reed was speechless. And then she started figuring things out, like, this doesn't really make sense to me. And that bad blood she remembered between Colin, she thought about the German Shepherd. Maybe that was what caused these injuries, the mysterious arm injuries. And in her mind, she's starting to think. And then she remembered that tipster's information, which basically she then concludes she's being framed, but she doesn't understand why. And this sort of put a finer point on it. She believed that it was Proctor that was sort of orchestrating this. So the prosecutors doubled down on their belief that Reed's the killer. After the grand jury reviewed the prosecutor's evidence, it concluded there was sufficient evidence to charge her with second-degree murder, implying she had intentionally killed O'Keefe. On June 9th, Proctor himself walked up to Reed's home and once again arrested her. So now they're arresting her for second-degree murder. Now it's no longer a hit and run by accident or she didn't know what's going on. Now they're saying she intentionally did this, which is just insane. To me, it is. They post bail. She was getting really nervous at this point, okay? So 2 months later, she's at her laptop again, and she sees Alan Jackson. He was a criminal defense attorney. He represented people like Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein. She basically asked him if he would represent her. As Unetti summarized the case, Jackson interrupted. How the fuck are they saying he got these injuries? Between O'Keefe's swollen black eyes, gashes on his arm, Reed's boyfriend appeared as though he'd been beaten up before being attacked by a dog, not run over by a car. Yeah. Reed's lawyers also realized Proctor's original affidavit. The lead detective said he'd arrived at Reed's parents' house at 4:30 p.m. and towed her car at 5:30, but the security footage shows that those times were wrong. And Karen's SUV was actually towed closer to 4:12 p.m. That's a big discrepancy, 78 minutes. Reed and her attorneys claim this left Proctor alone with the car with plenty of time to break her taillight, plant the evidence at 34 Fairview. So, that's a huge claim. And, bold claims require, they require something to back them up. And honestly, basically, this man lied. Proctor lied on an affidavit. A detective lied and said that he towed her car at 5:30 p.m. But they have evidence from Karen Reed's own security footage at her home, as well as a Dighton police report that shows that's not when he took her car. He took her car an hour and 18 minutes earlier than he says he did. That's a lot. And that's chain of custody for evidence. Her car was evidence in a murder scene. And you've got the lead detective lying about when he towed that car. That's not good. Jackson officially joins the defense team and starts looking for evidence to exonerate Reed and prove their theory. So, but more suspicious stuff happened. I mean, a lot of shit going on. Brian Albert, apparently, right after this happened, got rid of the dog, the German Shepherd, and they sold the house. They sold the house that this happened in. So now the house is gone. They'd probably like to bulldoze that house like they bulldozed the Idaho 4 house. But it wasn't until March that they found what they considered a bombshell, an incriminating incriminating Google search on McCabe's phone, which she had turned over to the prosecution voluntarily. According to the analysis, McCabe appeared to have Googled "Haas long to die in cold." She probably meant to say how, right? At 2:27 a.m., the night that O'Keefe was killed. That's really odd to be asking that question at 2:27 a.m. How long to die in cold? The same search appeared later at 6:23 a.m. and then at 6:24 a.m. That's probably when she typed it in later, remembering that she had typed it at 2:27 a.m. and that might get her in trouble. That's what I would do. Isn't that what you would do? Yeah. On April 12th, although I wouldn't lie to begin with and be involved, to be clear, in a cover-up of a murder. On April 12th, Jackson submits this he submits a 92-page affidavit. And, they're basically saying, like, what's going on? 5 days later, their wish came true after multiple news tipsters told him to investigate the O'Keefe murder. Aidan Kearney, a blogger who goes by the name of Turtleboy. I hate calling him a blogger. Just call him a journalist. A journalist is someone who reports news. Sat down in his Holden home, surrounded by his kids, and read through the case filings. Okay, and so that's when Turtleboy gets involved. And I'm just going to stop there because what has happened since then, right? There's been a lot that's happened since then. And I want to just bring up this piece that I read from Turtleboy's blog, okay? Turtleboy's blog. And so Turtleboy has since been arrested. He was arrested twice. First, he was arrested for intimidating witnesses. And this is kind of what they were saying was the intimidation factor. Let's just bring that up here. Let's go to YouTube, Turtleboy. Right here. Sorry about that. I want to go to the first time. Here's Turtleboy the first time.
Of John O'Keefe. Reed was performing CPR at the time. So this is Jennifer McCabe on the right and her sister, Nicole Albert, on the left. Nicole Albert is the wife of Brian Albert, who lived at the house at 34.
Okay, so this is the first time Turtleboy is reporting on this case. Prior to that, he hadn't really been involved. In part 2, I'm going to go over what the big controversy is right now. There's many controversies in this case. However, I'm going to go over in part 2 what exactly happened. How did Turtleboy end up in jail? Why was he arrested twice? And we're going to talk about the accusations throughout that Turtleboy has been communicating this whole time with Karen Reed and basically being a, quote, mouthpiece for Karen Reed. Because there are a lot of people that are upset about this, and because they feel like they've been lied to, because he didn't say that he had been communicating with her, and now it seems that maybe he has. Which I find ridiculous, by the way. Let's just put that out there. A journalist is allowed to talk to a murder defendant, number one. And also a journalist is allowed to keep their sources confidential. That's what the First Amendment in this country is all about. If you're going to force journalists to name their sources, nobody's going to talk to a journalist, right? Nobody's going to do that. But let's get into that in the next episode. Special shout out to any turtle riders here and anybody who's new and hasn't followed this case. I hope I've made something of it more easy to understand. It's a really, really complex case because of the accusations going back and forth. And one last thing I will mention before signing off on this, federal prosecutors, the U.S. attorney is now looking into the prosecution, how it was handled, how the investigation of this case was handled. Okay, that's a big deal, right? When you've got U.S. attorney coming in saying, yeah, we need some information. We want to see how your department and your prosecution handled this case from the jump. And Michael Morrissey, who is the attorney, the prosecuting attorney in this case. Is he the prosecuting attorney? I'm messing that up, I think. But he is involved in representing this case, is not too happy about these developments. I'll get into a little bit more about that in the next episode. Until then, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this made sense, guys. Take care.